You keep chasing the next thing, the next experience, the next high, the next person, the next distraction. You scroll until your eyes burn. You drink until you forget. You fuck until you're numb. You buy things you don't need. You start projects you'll never finish. You create drama where there is none. And somewhere in the middle of all this frantic movement, you catch yourself in a moment of silence and feel it, the void. That awful, terrifying emptiness that all your pleasure-seeking was supposed to fill. But here's what makes it unbearable. The void isn't shrinking, it's growing. Every hit of dopamine, every distraction, every moment of manufactured joy somehow makes the emptiness underneath feel larger, darker, more insistent. And you know this. You're not stupid. You can see the pattern. You can see yourself reaching for your phone the moment you feel uncomfortable. You can see yourself planning the next escape before the current one has even ended. You can see the exhaustion in your own eyes when you look in the mirror. The pleasure doesn't work anymore. Or it works for shorter and shorter intervals, requiring more and more intensity to produce less and less satisfaction. You've become a hedonic ghost, moving through experiences without actually experiencing them, consuming without tasting, touching without feeling. So, you ask yourself the question that keeps you up at night. What's wrong with me? Why can't I just enjoy things anymore? Why do I need so much stimulation just to feel barely alive? Am I broken? Am I depressed? Have I burned out my capacity for joy? And underneath all those questions is the real terror. Am I going to feel this way forever? But what if I told you that nothing is wrong with you? What if this isn't a malfunction, but a transformation? What if your inability to lose yourself in pleasure anymore isn't a loss of capacity, but an evolutionary leap in consciousness? What if the void you're running from is actually trying to show you something that will change everything? Let me explain what's actually happening to you. For most of your life, pleasure worked as an effective distraction from something fundamental. Heidegger called this fundamental thing being towards death, the basic existential anxiety that comes from knowing you exist and that you will die. But let's be more specific about what that means in your actual experience. Every human being is born into what he called thrownness, this condition of finding yourself already here, already in a situation you didn't choose, with a consciousness you didn't ask for, facing a death you can't avoid. This creates a baseline existential discomfort, a kind of metaphysical homesickness that has no cure. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Most people never directly confront this discomfort. Instead, they do what Heidegger called falling, which means losing themselves in the world of things and distractions and the opinions of others. They become what he called Das Man, the they self, the one who does what they do, wants what they want, feels what they feel. And pleasure. The pursuit of pleasure is one of the most sophisticated ways to fall, because pleasure is convincing. It feels like it's adding something to your life. It feels like growth, like living fully, like saying yes to existence. But here's the mechanism you couldn't see. Pleasure doesn't actually resolve the existential discomfort, it just covers it. Every experience of pleasure is actually a moment of forgetting. A moment where you're so absorbed in sensation or achievement or validation that you temporarily forget the underlying condition of your existence. The food tastes so good, you forget you're mortal. The sex is so intense, you forget you're alone. The accomplishment feels so significant, you forget it's all ultimately meaningless. Pleasure is existential anesthesia, and it worked beautifully for years, until it didn't. Think of it like this. Imagine you've been living in a room where someone has been slowly, gradually increasing the brightness of the lights over many years. So slowly that you never noticed. The room started dim, comfortable, easy on the eyes. You could look at anything without strain. But year after year, the lights got brighter. And to compensate, to still see anything clearly, you had to squint harder. You had to look away more often. You had to take breaks in darkness. Eventually, even looking at things that used to be pleasant becomes painful. The light is so intense now that it's not illuminating anymore. It's blinding. This is what happened to your hedonic system. You've been turning up the brightness of your pleasures, increasing the intensity, the frequency, the variety. Trying to maintain that same feeling of forgetting, that same sense of satisfaction, but the mechanism has a built-in problem. It requires escalation. The thing about using pleasure as existential anesthesia is that you develop tolerance. The 10th drink doesn't hit like the first. The 100th sexual encounter doesn't electrify like the early ones. The 1000th meal, no matter how exquisite, is still just food. And if you're still here with me, if this is resonating in that uncomfortable way, that means it's true. Maybe consider staying. We explore these depths every single week. You know where the button is. So, what did you do? You turned up the intensity. You sought novelty. You stacked pleasures on top of each other. You pursued extremes. You tried to recapture that original feeling of complete absorption, complete forgetting. But here's the paradox that nobody tells you. The more desperately you pursue pleasure, the more aware you become of what you're running from. The escalation itself creates gaps. The frantic quality of your seeking creates moments of clarity, and in those moments you see it, the void. The thing underneath the fundamental existential condition that all this pleasure-seeking was designed to obscure. This is what happened to you. Your capacity for pleasure didn't break. Your need for distraction finally became visible to you. The mechanism became transparent. You can see through it now. And once you can see through it, it stops working. It's like learning how a magic trick is done. Even if you want to be amazed by it again, even if you miss the wonder of it, you can't unsee the method. You can't unknow what you know. Let me give you an analogy that might clarify what's actually occurring in your consciousness. Imagine you've spent your entire life in a cinema, watching movies. Beautiful movies, terrible movies, boring movies, thrilling movies, but always movies. The cinema is comfortable. It has plush seats, perfect temperature, unlimited snacks. And, most importantly, the movies are absorbing. When you're watching them, you forget you're in a cinema. You forget you're sitting in a seat. You forget you have a body. You're completely lost in the story on the screen. This works perfectly for years, decades even. You become a connoisseur of movies. You develop sophisticated tastes. You can distinguish between high art and cheap thrills. You have favorite genres, favorite directors, favorite moments. You've built an entire identity around your relationship with these films. You are a person who loves movies, who understands movies, who lives for movies. Then one day, something shifts. Maybe you notice a flicker in the projection. Maybe you hear the machinery behind the screen. Maybe someone opens a door and you see light coming from outside. Whatever it is, your attention moves just slightly. Instead of being absorbed in the story, you notice the screen itself. You see it as a screen. You see the frame around it. You notice your own posture in the seat. You feel the texture of the armrest under your hand. You remember, suddenly and completely, that you're in a cinema watching a projection. And here's where it gets disorienting. You try to go back. You try to lose yourself in the movie again. You want that absorption, that forgetting, that complete immersion, but you can't, because now you keep noticing the screen. You keep feeling the seat. You keep being aware that you're watching, not living. The movies haven't changed. Your eyes haven't broken. But something in your relationship to the experience has fundamentally shifted. You're no longer capable of complete immersion. You're no longer capable of total forgetting. At first, this feels like loss. It feels like something precious has been taken from you. You watch other people around you, still completely absorbed in their movies, laughing and crying and gasping at the plot twists, and you feel jealous. You feel broken. Why can't you just enjoy the movie anymore? What happened to your capacity for wonder? But then, slowly, you start to notice something else. With your attention no longer completely captured by the screen, you begin to sense the space you're actually in, the real space, the cinema itself. You notice how the air feels against your skin. You hear sounds that aren't coming from the speakers. You sense your own breathing, your own heartbeat, your own physical presence in a way you never did when you were absorbed in the films. And you realize something shocking. The cinema, the actual space you're in, is more real than anything on the screen has ever been. It's just quieter, less dramatic, less stimulating, but more real. Once your eyes adjust to seeing the room instead of just the screen, you notice something else. There's a door. There's always been a door. You just never looked for it because you were too absorbed in the movies. And outside that door, you begin to sense it's something you've never directly experienced. Not another cinema, not a better screen, but the actual world the cinema was built inside of. This is what's happening when you can't lose yourself in pleasure anymore. The pleasures are the movies, perfectly designed to absorb you, to make you forget the cinema, to keep your attention on the screen. And they worked. For years, they worked beautifully. But something has shifted in your consciousness. You've seen the frame, you've felt the seat. You're aware now of the mechanism of distraction itself, and you can't unsee it. The pleasures haven't changed. You have now. Here's where most people make a catastrophic mistake. When they realize the old movies aren't working anymore, they assume they need better movies. More intense movies. Stranger movies. Multiple screens at once. They think the problem is that the content isn't stimulating enough, so they escalate. They pursue more extreme pleasures, more novel experiences, more intense sensations. They try to force the immersion through sheer intensity, but this is like turning up the volume on a movie you can see through. It doesn't restore the absorption. It just makes the mechanism more obvious. The louder it gets, the more you notice you're listening to speakers. The more intense the pleasure, the more you notice you're trying to use pleasure to not feel something else. It's a hunger that feeds itself. The more desperately you seek satisfaction, the more unsatisfied you feel. The more frantically you pursue pleasure, the more the void underneath becomes impossible to ignore. If you're recognizing yourself in this pattern, maybe it's time to join the space where we go deeper every week. You already know this isn't surface-level content. Hit that subscribe button if you want to keep going deeper. You're chasing an impossibility, trying to return to unconsciousness through conscious effort, trying to forget that you've remembered, trying to become absorbed in something you can now see through. It's like trying to believe in Santa Claus again after you've found the presents hidden in the closet. The belief is gone. The innocence is gone. No amount of wanting it back will restore it. So what do you actually need? Not more pleasure? Not more intensity? Not more distraction? What you need is something that sounds almost offensive in its simplicity. You need to stop running. You need to turn around and face the thing you've been fleeing from. You need to sit in the cinema seat and look at the void directly, instead of constantly glancing at screens to avoid it. There's a name for this, turning around, this facing. Heidegger called it resoluteness, but that word sounds too martial, too aggressive. Kierkegaard called it the leap of faith, but that suggests something religious that this isn't necessarily about. Maybe the better term is something like existential sobriety, the condition of being fully present to your own existence, without anesthesia, without distraction, without the constant noise of pleasure seeking to muffle the silence underneath. What does this state feel like? It's not what you expect. It's not enlightenment in some mystical sense. It's not constant joy. It's not some perpetual state of peace or bliss. Those would just be new movies, new distractions, new ways of avoiding the fundamental condition. Instead, it's something stranger and more subtle. It's the experience of being here without needing to be anywhere else, of existing without needing to justify or decorate or improve the fact of your existence, of feeling the void not as something to be filled, but as the actual space in which your life occurs. Listen to how Schopenhauer described this. He said that most human life is like a pendulum swinging between pain and boredom. When we're in pain, we seek pleasure to escape it. When we achieve pleasure, we quickly become bored and restless, which is its own kind of pain. So we seek new pleasure. Back and forth, never finding rest. But he said there was a third estate, available to very few, where the pendulum stops. Not because you've found perfect pleasure or eliminated pain, but because you've stopped being driven by the pendulum itself. You've stepped out of the mechanism. You're watching it instead of being swept along by it. This is what's available to you now. In this moment where pleasure no longer works as it used to, you think you've lost your capacity for joy. Actually, you've lost your capacity for distraction. You think you're broken. Actually, you're becoming sober. You think you're falling apart. Actually, you're waking up. But here's the thing. The new state doesn't feel like what you think awakening should feel like. It doesn't feel exciting or dramatic or even particularly interesting. It feels quiet, simple, often quite ordinary. And this is why so many people turn back. They stand at the threshold of existential sobriety and think, this is what I gave up all my pleasures for. This quiet, simple, undramatic presence, this can't be it. There must be something more. And they go back to chasing movies, back to seeking highs, back to the exhausting treadmill of hedonic escalation. Because the real thing seems too plain, too unimpressive, too disappointingly simple. Now, I must warn you about something. You might think this sounds rather dull. You might think I'm describing some kind of gray, joyless existence where you give up pleasure and sit in austere meditation on the void for the rest of your life. You might be thinking, even if what you're saying is true, even if I am running from existential discomfort through pleasure seeking, at least pleasure feels good. At least it's something. What you're describing sounds like nothing. And I understand that objection. I validate it, because you're still thinking like someone in the cinema, someone for whom the only measure of value is intensity of stimulation. You're still thinking that life is about the accumulation of peak experiences, that meaning comes from the height of the highs you can achieve. This is the logic of hedonic escalation speaking. It's the voice that says, more is better, intense is superior, quiet means empty. But here's what you're missing. Intensity is expensive. It requires constant escalation. It burns out your receptors. It demands your entire attention and energy just to maintain. And most importantly, it's unsustainable. You cannot live at peak experience. You cannot live in constant pleasure. The body won't allow it. The mind won't allow it. Reality won't allow it. Eventually, inevitably, the intensity drops. And what's left if you've built your entire sense of meaning around intensity? What's left when the intensity becomes impossible to maintain? The alternative isn't dullness. It's something that has no adequate name in our hyperactive, pleasure-obsessed culture. It's something like richness in simplicity, depth in presence, fullness in the ordinary. It's the ability to sit in a chair and feel the weight of your body and not need anything else in that moment. To drink water and taste the water, to breathe and feel the breath, to exist without the constant commentary of wanting and judging and comparing and seeking. This sounds like nothing until you've actually experienced it. And you can't experience it while you're still running. You can't taste stillness while you're in motion. You can't sense the space while you're absorbed in the screen. Let me tell you about someone I know. Call him David. David was extraordinary at pleasure. He was a connoisseur of experience. He traveled to 70 countries by the time he was 35. He could tell you about wine regions in Argentina, street food in Vietnam, hidden jazz clubs in Tokyo. He collected experiences the way some people collect stamps. He had a rotation of lovers, each fulfilling different needs. He did ayahuasca in Peru, meditation retreats in Thailand, silent walks in Scottish Highlands. He was living the life that our culture tells us is the pinnacle of human existence: maximum experience, minimum commitment, constant novelty, perpetual growth. And then he got sick. Nothing fatal, but chronic. Severe chronic fatigue that made travel impossible, made even leaving the house difficult. Suddenly, all his carefully curated pleasure-seeking mechanisms were unavailable. No more trips, no more restaurants, no more late nights with interesting people, just him, in his apartment, with the silence he'd spent decades avoiding. The first few months were hell, pure hell. He described it as withdrawal. Every cell in his body screamed for stimulation, for distraction, for something to do. He went through all the stages: denial, anger, bargaining, depression. He tried to maintain his old life through screens, living vicariously through others' Instagram feeds, watching travel documentaries, planning trips he couldn't take. But that just made it worse. It was like watching people eat when you're starving. Then, something happened, he stopped. Not intentionally, not as some noble spiritual practice. He just ran out of energy for the struggle. He stopped trying to make his situation different. He stopped comparing his current experience to his past experiences. He stopped imagining future experiences that would make this bearable. He just stopped. And in that stopping, in that exhausted surrender, he noticed something. The quality of silence had changed. It was still silent, but it wasn't empty. There was something in the ordinariness of his days that he'd never noticed before. The way afternoon light moved across his wall, the specific texture of his own thoughts when they weren't being drowned out by input, the strange comfort of routine, of knowing exactly where he was and what he was doing, the absence of decision fatigue that came from not having 1,000 options. He wasn't happy exactly. That's not the right word. He was something more like present. He was there for his own life in a way he'd never been when he was chasing experiences. All those years of peak experiences, and he'd barely been there for any of them. He'd been documenting them, processing them, comparing them, preparing for the next one. But actually being in them, actually feeling them, that was new. When his health eventually improved, He didn't return to his old life. He couldn't. Not because the old pleasures weren't available, but because they didn't make sense anymore. It would be like watching children's cartoons after you've learned to read. Not wrong, exactly, but no longer adequate to what you've become. This is what I mean by existential sobriety. David didn't become enlightened. He didn't achieve some permanent state of bliss. He just stopped being absent. He stopped using pleasure as a way to avoid being here. And in that stopping, he found something that doesn't have a name, but is more reliable than any pleasure ever was. You are in the middle of this process now. This is not a mistake. This is not a malfunction. This is how it works. The machine of pleasure-seeking has to break down. The mechanism has to become visible. The anesthesia has to wear off. It feels like dying because something is dying. The you that needed constant stimulation to feel alive, the you that measured life in peak experiences, the you that was always somewhere else, always planning the next thing, always reaching for something to fill the void, that you is dying, and it should die. Not because there was something wrong with it, but because it was never sustainable. It was a phase. A necessary phase, maybe, but a phase nonetheless. A way of being that worked until it didn't. And now you're in the space between. The old you is dying, and the new you hasn't fully formed yet. You're in the void, in the gap, in the silence between pleasures, and you think this is the worst place to be? Actually, this is the only place where transformation happens. Subscribe if you're finding value in this exploration, because we go even deeper every week. So, what do you actually do? How do you navigate this transition without falling back into the old patterns or forcing some premature resolution? First, understand this. There is no technique to force this. Any attempt to achieve existential sobriety becomes just another form of pleasure seeking, another movie to get absorbed in. You cannot try your way into presence. You cannot effort your way into non-effort. The harder you grasp for it, the more it eludes you. This isn't mysticism. It's simple physics. The grasping itself is the problem. What you can do is stop doing certain things. Stop trying to fill the void. Every time you feel that emptiness, that lack, that sense of something missing, notice your immediate impulse. The impulse will be to reach for something. Phone, food, people, substances, shopping, sex work, anything. Just notice that impulse. Don't judge it, don't fight it, don't indulge it. Just see it. See how automatic it is. See how powerful it is. See how it promises relief and delivers only temporary numbing. The practice isn't to resist the impulse. Resistance is just another form of engagement, another way of giving it power. The practice is to see through it, to recognize it as the mechanism it is. To watch yourself reaching for distraction with the same detached curiosity, you might watch a bird building a nest. Interesting. Natural? Not wrong, but not necessary to participate in. Second, develop a different quality of attention. Most of your life, your attention has been captured by things, by stimulation, by pleasure and pain, by the movies on the screen. Now you need to learn to place attention on the space itself, on the silence, on the void. Not to fill it or fix it or understand it, but simply to be with it. This sounds passive, but it's actually the most active thing you can do. It requires tremendous energy to not distract yourself. It requires immense strength to sit with discomfort without reaching for relief. Your entire nervous system is wired to avoid this. Your entire psychological structure is designed to generate distractions when you get too close to the void. So when you choose to stay, when you choose to remain present with the emptiness, you're working against millions of years of evolutionary programming. Do this. Sit somewhere comfortable. Not trying to meditate, not performing some spiritual practice. Just sit. Feel your body in the chair. Notice your breath without changing it. And then notice the silence underneath everything. Not the absence of sound. The silence underneath the sound. The space in which all experience is occurring. The void you've been running from. It will be uncomfortable. You'll want to move. You'll suddenly remember important things you need to do. You'll get itchy. You'll get restless. You'll think this is stupid. All of that is the mechanism trying to pull you back into distraction. Don't fight it. Don't force stillness. Just notice. Notice how desperately your mind wants to be anywhere but here. Notice how skilled it is at generating reasons to leave. Notice the void itself, that strange emptiness that isn't quite emptiness, that space that isn't quite space. Do this for as long as you can stand it. maybe 5 minutes, maybe 30 seconds. It doesn't matter. You're not trying to achieve anything. You're just practicing being here without distraction. And every second you manage it, you're weakening the old mechanism and allowing something new to emerge. Third, when the impulse for pleasure comes, and it will come, examine what you're actually seeking. Not the surface desire, but what's underneath it. When you want to scroll through your phone, what are you actually seeking? When you want to drink, what are you running from? When you want sexual intensity, what void are you trying to fill? Get curious about the mechanism itself rather than just following it blindly. You'll notice something interesting. Most of your pleasure seeking isn't actually about pleasure. It's about avoiding a specific kind of discomfort. The discomfort of being with yourself without distraction. The discomfort of facing your own mortality, your own insignificance, your own fundamental aloneness. The discomfort of the void. And here's the paradox. The void you're avoiding doesn't actually hurt. Your resistance to it hurts. Your constant fleeing from it hurts. The void itself is just space, just silence, just the basic condition of existence. It only feels threatening when you're running from it. When you turn around and face it directly, it transforms into something else entirely. Not pleasure, not some new peak experience, but something more like home. Like the place you've always been, but never noticed because you were too busy looking elsewhere? Stop trying to be somewhere other than where you are. Stop trying to feel something other than what you're feeling. Stop trying to become some better, more evolved, more enlightened version of yourself. All of that is just more movement, more distraction, more movies. The real transformation happens when you stop transforming, when you stop seeking,